Hi everyone, this is UBERSOY, and today I will be reviewing Adam Something's philosophy and behavior, as well as providing a huge white pill for conservatives and right-wingers, and a black pill for leftists. But if you don't want to hear me ranting about Adam Something and other leftists for the next 7 minutes, then skip to the bad news for lefties part of the video, as frankly it contains a lot of information that everyone on our side should hear, as it will motivate them to continue the fight even further. Now, if you follow Adam, you are probably aware that recently Adam Something had complained about some guy chimping out on him on Discord, and then Adam Something had made a big cringe storm out of it. It was another YouTuber who is in fact not chimped out at Adam, but acted respectfully there and in his video responses, producing 3 videos on him in a row. Unlike me being very respectful to the actual video and even biting some bullets from Adam, for which I have critiqued him, and subsequently he even addressed a letter of condescension and false intellectual superiority from Adam in 2 parts that I highly recommend you to watch, and I think he shows how condescending and ignorant Adam is about politics. The actual reason behind me recording this video was not even that, but my own little interaction with Adam, or a lack thereof. First, I was informed by a friend of mine that Adam actually wants to debate me on Discord, which I have gladly accepted, and immediately wrote to Adam that I'm interested in it if it will be one-on-one debate without like 20 kids being in the same call. And what do you think has happened? Well, you already know what happened unless you are not looking at the video. He banned me, and practically as soon as I have joined. Apparently, after like 3 days of my friend constantly pinging him in the chat, he said that the reason for the ban was being unable to get past some other website to prove that I'm a real person, which Adam Something interprets as, and I quote, fucking around. Well, I also sent him a friend request after he has banned me, and of course he has denied it, and obviously I was not interested in joining his server anyway. I was there just for the debate, plus why would I need to do this whole procedure given that Adam perfectly knows who I am, as I have introduced myself as UBERSOY, and he is clearly familiar with my videos as he talked about me in his server, accusing me of being late 2016 usual dialogue NPC tree, because apparently all I talk about on my channel is how feminism and SJWs are ruining video games or something, and how the Young Turks is really lying to you. I'm complaining about things like, why did they add so many black people in Battlefield 1, or a typical European folk story? That's not historically accurate, or how that BuzzFeed video is really stupid, producing porn outrage all the time, because that's all what I do. I'm always outraged by the fact that women might have some social rights, unlike of course Adam Something, who never does any generalizations on people, is pretty smart and does not dislike anyone, always cites sources and knows perfectly well what conservatives believe in, even without interacting with them. He probably could recite Edmund Burke's take on the French Revolution and the 6 volumes of The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire by Edward Gibbon word by word, as well as name all the core values of Western civilization, because he watched a lot of Sean and H. Bomber Guy, and by the way, it was all sarcasm. But for now, I'll just let you know that there are those 2 brilliant Telegram channels, History Memes Official for sharing historical memes and History Quizzes for testing your historical knowledge, so make sure to check them out. And now back to the video. He could actually have known what right-wingers represent had he actually read anything or listened to, for example, Roger Scruton or Douglas Murray or other contemporary conservative or right-wing intellectuals, and this sort of ignorance is rather typical among leftists, as Jonathan Haidt and other academics clearly have established. Leftists don't understand conservatives and always strawman them due to the fact that leftists have an unbalanced moral foundations and cannot truly grasp much of what conservatives say. Moreover, the guy brags about going to a university and getting into humanities, but don't they teach you there at least basic political literacy, so you're not claiming that libertarians are fascists because libertarians are overwhelmingly right-wing, and as we have already established, fascists like small governments, free markets, taking personal responsibility and individualism, just like Jordan Peterson, because that's what a fascist is.
Everyone knows this.
So it's very important to know.
Hello, Vosh, you're really saying Peterson is a fascist? Yeah. Yeah, 100. Yeah, of course. He's a cultural conservative who preaches about degeneracy and uses the Nazi talking point of cultural Marxism as evidence that the West is crumbling. Yeah. The position that he pushes, yeah. In reality, the greatest perpetuators of fascism are not the lunatic Gestapo swastika on forehead types. They're the people like Jordan Peterson, the phony intellectuals who sit at home and they convince millions of young men that they're the ones who are going to be needed to prevent the cultural death of the West.
Is that what they teach you in Germany, or this is what you learned yourself from watching Bosch 101 courses? I, as a political science major, am absolutely appalled by this level of political illiteracy coming from a person who probably thinks of himself as a rare genius. Frankly, I suppose this is the reason why Adam Something decided to ban me, as after watching those two videos, he probably went to see my debates with other people and watched more videos on my channel, and he immediately knew that he will be schooled like a pretentious pseudo-intellectual that he is. He knows that half of the shit he says on a regular basis will be asked to be proven, and his snarky comments will not fly off the radar of a person who clearly is smarter than him. He knows I will blow his sophistry to pieces, and that's why he banned me, as well as the other guy who was trying very much to argue with him in good faith, but was instead called a Ben Shapiro's alt and accused of chimping out. Now, you may like Adam Something's takes, but you certainly cannot deny that he is too arrogant for his stupidity. I even commented on his post on YouTube and asked him to prove any of his assertions, and it of course was left without a reply, because he knows he has nothing to support his assertions with besides them being supported by the people who have relative amount of social privilege, and he is left as a typical midwit to just follow the crowd, although he's probably lower than a midwit as he hides behind those baseless assertions with a bunch of we know statements, condescensions and strawmans, and of course that is allowed because all of his opinions are being validated by other bread tubers, so he doesn't need to think or know more, just like Vosh pretty much. Now, I would like to touch this thing in great detail, but for now I will address his stupid philosophy that naturally emerges among all viewers of BreadTube, which he laid out in his recent video, but also earlier in a community post, which is to say that he doesn't have much to say besides repeating himself. He claims he values and wants to expand freedom, except when it harms others. Now, on its surface, this sounds very reasonable, and why wouldn't you? As long as you don't harm people physically, psychologically, and financially, you should be fine. So like, do not beat a person on the street for no reason, don't psychologically abuse your spouse or children, and don't steal money from people, right? Well, considering how those limitations are already as vague as anything, given that people are accusing Michael Knowles of committing violence while he's giving a lecture at university, while much of the intelligence research is being suppressed, any right-wing belief is considered psychological harm. Why? Well, the left is in charge of who is deciding what psychological harm is. If of course I were to be in the positions of power deciding what is harm and was as indoctrinated and dumb as he is, I would of course attribute most of his videos as a form of psychological harm, as after watching it I felt annoyed, and psychological harm may be more painful than physical harm, as unironic studies have confirmed. Now, with regards to financial harm, since he then started talking about workplace democracy and the coconut analogy, I assume hiring people to work for somebody else is a form of harm too, and you should not have this opportunity because he views voluntary exchange as a form of harm. Also, I like that he had to clarify that this does not apply to fetuses, probably to virtue signal that he is also pro-choice as a good feminist that he is. Well, I'm also pro-choice, but you'll never hear me say anything like that. He can essentially be described as a little dumber version of Rousseau, who is all about that freedom, criticizing his contemporaries and philosophers such as Hobbes and Locke for lacking it, while himself viewing freedom as surrendering to the general will, and on a practical level, whoever claims they possess it, like Mussolini for example. Unsurprisingly, a lot of people took notes. Stalin, for instance, who is a well-known freedom fighter and a struggler against the oppression by defy the international capitalism, even made a constitution that was one of the best in the world, guaranteeing way more freedoms and rights than the United States and the UK, which does not even have a constitution, as long as of course you don't go against the interests of the workers, which again sounds pretty reasonable and frankly less limiting than Adam's 3 restrictions. And why would you go against the interests of the workers? Are you some sort of a bourgeoisie pig? Now, if you haven't read Rousseau and are not going to, I recommend watching Isaiah Berlin's take on Rousseau and his influence, and I will provide a link for that below. But anyways, the point that I'm making is that Adam Something is not an intellectual with unique thoughts, but rather a soulless product made by the leftist-centric industrial conveyor of pseudo-intellectuals. Applied Virtue has clearly explained how rare geniuses like Adam are made, to a person refusing to comprehend how somebody can be that stupid. It's simple, he said. Know absolutely fuck all about what you're talking about. Check. Repeat the same talking point that you hear from your friends, or in his case the online leftists. Check. Think yourself as a genius because you got good grades in school. Now, I don't actually know what grades he got in school, but he is certainly well approved on BreadTube, so check. The real life implications of that is that overall less leftists will think, as they are not required to, because most popular influencers already reaffirm their beliefs and they just rely on a handful of Noam Chomskys and Mark Fishers to lead the vanguard. Oh well, there is an unpublished book written by Edward Dutton and J.O.A. Reiner Hills called Left Behind that will be available sometime early next year, but the simulation and its results which the book uses has already been published on GitHub, and what I want to draw your attention to from those results of their simulation, which was determined accordingly from the US General Social Survey IQ and demographic data, is this particular graph that shows that although currently there are more committed leftists with IQs higher than average for the general population, if you look at the blue or actual graph fertility trend, because committed leftists don't reproduce anywhere near as much as their committed right-wing counterparts of equivalent intelligence, they are maladaptive.
Unfortunately, Trevor passed away from a heart attack while masturbating to produce sperm for artificial insemination. But I have some eggs frozen, so just as soon as the right guy comes along,
This means that in just a few generations there will be way less of those Seans that would justify Adam Something's ignorance. The portion of smart right-wingers on the other hand will double their numbers by the mid-century. They will be 6% of the population, where now they are about 3%. Leftists on the other hand will plummet from 6% to less than 2% in this period. Put another way, that means that whereas now there are roughly 2 committed left-wingers for every committed right-winger in the population of about average IQ, because of major differences in fertility, in the future that most of us will live to see, there will be 3 committed right-wingers for every 1 committed leftist of above average IQ. So, in other words, leftist intellectuals are simply being bred out of existence, and we will see more people like Mencius Moldbach and Charles Murray occupying more echelons of power in the future. Now, there are of course some caveats with that. First of all, intelligence will be lower across the entire population for every demographic, which includes white conservatives, that are going to produce even more low IQ hillbillies in the below average IQ population. And although their mean IQ will be higher for a short period of time in the 2040s, nevertheless, due to this massive baby boom of low IQ trailer park conservatives, liberal and conservative IQs will then converge to be about the same. Another limitation of just looking at fertility is that it may understate these results, as it does not take into account leftists committing suicides more frequently due to their natural maladaptability and near monopoly on the mentally ill population. Also, to take these simulations literally, you would have to assume the heritability of political beliefs to be around 1, whereas in reality it ranges from 0.4 to 0.8. Future trends are thus likely to be a lot more complicated than this, and Dutton and Rainer Hills spent much of their book developing a more mature theory of the future that accounts for interfering environmental forces, concluding that leftism will implode much faster among the white middle class than is even portrayed by the fertility trends shown here. These complexities aside, what we know for certain is that whatever remaining intellectuals are to be in the future, they will be mostly on the right, and this process you can actually witness happening in front of your eyes. People like Adam Something are living proof that the intellectual capabilities of the left are diminishing, as those are the people who are now popular amongst the leftists. And don't get me wrong, for the time being leftists are still going to be controlling the academia, the media, and all major corporations. Also, they have produced way more intellectuals historically, but what have they produced now? What are the groundbreaking theoretical accomplishments of leftists in the past 20 years, besides pushing the ideas that everything is a social construction, which is not even anything new? Are there any new social theories? What about a political theory? Is there anything new? Are there any significant figures that are saying something new? Eugenics? Oh wait, now if you wish to know what the right has been up to in the recent years, I recommend watching my other response to Adam Something, and frankly it's just the start, as these numbers will double while leftists will decrease by number 3, and evidently institutional left-wing hegemony will be penetrated and restrictions on ideas will be lifted, potentially educating people to be more right-wing. Mark my words, leftists will cease to be intellectuals and will have way less significant figures, at least those who are capable of transforming the world, unless of course you equate being left-wing with progress. Well, in that case I'm the biggest leftist out there.